We are now going to discuss the first hypothesis, that says acquisition versus learning hypothesis. Two concepts are related to language learning. One is acquisition and the second is learning. This distinction, or the distinction between the two, acquisition and learning, is the one of the hypothesis which is considered as the most important hypothesis established by Stephen Christian. So he made the distinction between these two, what we mean by acquisition and what we mean by learning. The acquired system or acquisition is the product of subconscious process, cognitive process, subconscious process, and the learning system or learning is the product of formal instruction. So that's the difference, that acquisition is the subconscious process, whereas learning is based on formal instruction. Language acquisition refers to and subconscious learning, and that involves intuition as well, the cognition, a very immediate cognition, a product of interaction between people in environments of the target language and culture. So basically that process takes place in the environment where the target language takes place, having an interaction with the people belonging to the culture of the target language. Learner here is an active player, similar to the way children learn their native language, a process that produces functional skill in the spoken language. So basically, first of all, is the spoken language which is emphasized, and functional skills of spoken language are developed, having communication or interaction with the people coming from the target language culture. Language learning focuses on the language in its written form, as it emphasizes the instructional aspect of grammatical rules, or giving the instructions and guidelines of the grammatical rules of a language. Therefore, the emphasis is on the written form and not the spoken form. And the objective is to understand the structure and the rules of the language. The form is of greater importance than communication. So here in the language learning, it is the form. And when we say form, we are referring to the grammatical rules. That is more important instead of communication. And we have seen that in acquisition is the communication which takes the lead. Now, we have a summary of the differences between learning and acquisition. So let's see, what are the differences? Learning is considered artificial, meaning that the particular rules are provided to the learner, where acquisition is natural. The acquirer or learner acquired the language through input. It is technical, which means that specific aspects of language are given to learners based on the situation, whereas this is personal, having interaction with your parents or colleagues or people from other target language culture. Priority here is on the written language, and here the priority is on the spoken language. It is theory based, where the language analysis is conducted. Different theories are developed to see which particular theory can enable the learning process. And over here it is the practice, language in use. Here you have the formal instructions. Here you have the meaningful interaction, the acquiring of language in terms of fulfilling the meaningful interaction or communication. Deductive teaching is the rule driven, and here rule discovery, inductive coaching, which means it's bottom up approach, where the language is unfolded through discovery. Conscious process, and this is subconscious process. Here you have preset syllabus, where you have a syllabus which is determined before you impart the learning, or over here is learner-centered activities with room for improvisation. So here the acquirer or learner is in charge of the learning process. In learning, you have the translation and use of L1. But in acquisition, when you're acquiring second language, under this process, there is no translation and no first language. Activities over here are about the language, and here you have the activities in the language, because you see that the emphasis over here is on language in use. Over here you see that focus in learning, we see focus on form. The grammatical rules and the grammatical structures are emphasized, and over here is the communication that is of importance. It produces the knowledge and it produces the ability to communicate in a specific or particular situation. Language learning involves formal instruction and, according to Kreshn, is least effective than acquisition. Why is it least effective? Reason is that when you are acquiring and you are in a process which is effortless, that motivates learner. But a process which requires efforts on the part of learner demotivates the learner. That's why Kreshn thinks that this process, where a lot of grammatical rules are given to a learner and he is required to process those rules and provide the input, correct input, makes this process less effective. Since acquisition is a subconscious process, the acquirer is unaware of the process as it happens, as well as the newly acquired knowledge. So since it is a very natural process, it's subconscious process, the learner is not even aware of the knowledge he or she is acquiring. So this makes the process quite effortless. This hypothesis has received a lot of criticism as well, and among them the important are the McLaughlin, who argues that Kreshn's theory fails at every juncture. Kreshn has not defined his terms with enough precision. The empirical basis of the theory is weak, and the theory is not clear in its prediction. Now, his emphasis is on basically the understanding of the distinction that Kreshn has made between subconscious learning and conscious learning. Now, he thinks that if Kreshn says that acquisition is subconscious, that means it basically refers to the acquiring of language based on feelings, and conscious, by conscious, if Kreshn feels that it has to do with the understanding of grammatical rules, then it is rule based. But there is no evidence to state that when learners are acquiring or functioning, are they doing it on the basis of rules or on the basis of feelings. The second is another researcher who criticizes this Kreshn's claims that learning does not turn into acquisition. This is criticized by Gregg, who thinks that many second language learners believe that some rules can be acquired through learning. Now, he basically conducted an experiment, and he thinks that he gave the examples of a particular student who having forms of Japanese verb by memorizing the conjugation chart in his textbook, and he noticed that in few days his use of these forms became error-free with no input, but just with the help of little bit of drill. So based on this, Gregg thinks that his student learned the rules and acquired them, for he could produce the verbs error-free without meaningful interaction with native speakers. To conclude, Kreshn has made distinction between language acquisition and learning, where the former refers to the subconscious process through which an adult picking up of language is similar to that of child's acquisition of his or her first language, and the latter refers to the conscious and formal learning of the rules of second language.